Margaret Hill had lived in the same small brick house on the east side of Atlanta for over 40 years. The paint had faded and the porch steps creaked when you stepped on them, but to her it was the most beautiful place in the world. Every corner of that house carried memories: birthday candles blown out in the dining room, Christmas mornings filled with laughter, and quiet nights when she sat by the window praying for strength. At 78 years old, Margaret moved more slowly than she once had, but her mind was sharp and her heart remained generous. The neighbors called her Grandma Maggie, even if they weren't related to her. She was the kind of woman who waved at everyone from her porch swing and insisted on sending people home with a plate of food. Every Sunday morning, without fail, she dressed in her lavender church suit and attended service at Big Bethel AME Church. Her faith was her anchor. After losing her only daughter to illness more than 20 years ago, it was prayer that carried her through the darkest days. When her daughter passed, she left behind a 10-year-old boy, Daniel. Margaret did not hesitate. She stepped into the role of mother all over again. She worked long hours at a downtown diner, her feet aching as she poured coffee and wiped tables. At night, she cleaned office buildings while the city lights of Atlanta shimmered outside the windows. She sacrificed sleep, comfort, and sometimes even her own health to make sure Daniel had clean clothes, school supplies, and a warm meal. Daniel had been a sweet child once, curious, energetic, always asking questions. Margaret remembered helping him with homework at the kitchen table and cheering at his middle school basketball games. She believed that love and discipline would shape him into a good man. But as Daniel grew older, something shifted. He became restless, chasing quick money and easy opportunities instead of steady work. Still, Margaret defended him to anyone who questioned his choices. "He just needs guidance," she would say. "He'll find his way." By the time Daniel turned 28, life had not unfolded the way he had promised it would. He struggled to keep jobs and drifted between apartments. When he showed up at Margaret's door one humid summer evening with a duffel bag in hand, she didn't ask many questions. "Grandma," he said, "I just need a little time to get back on my feet." She opened the door wider and hugged him tightly. "This is your home," she told him. At first, things seemed peaceful. Daniel helped carry groceries and fixed a loose cabinet door in the kitchen. He offered to manage her bills online, explaining that everything was digital now. Margaret wasn't comfortable with computers, and the bank's website confused her. So she handed him her account information, trusting that her grandson would protect what she had spent decades building. Her life savings, carefully set aside from years of hard work, sat quietly in that account, meant to cover medical expenses and ensure she would never be a burden to anyone. Margaret's days continued in their gentle rhythm. She tended to her small garden, humming gospel songs as she watered the roses. She baked sweet potato pies for church events and sat with neighbors who needed company. Daniel, meanwhile, spent more time on his phone and left the house for long stretches without explanation. She assumed he was attending interviews or meeting friends. What Margaret did not see were the online transfers quietly draining her account. She did not see the shopping receipts or the luxury hotel bookings. She did not know that while she folded laundry in her modest home, Daniel was posting smiling photos from Miami beaches, wearing designer clothes and flashing expensive gadgets. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a utility notice slipped under her door. She frowned at it, certain it was a mistake. Daniel assured her he would handle it. She believed him. She always believed him. But as more letters arrived, each stamped with urgent red warnings, a quiet unease settled into her spirit. The house that had once felt like her sanctuary began to feel uncertain, as though something invisible was shifting beneath her feet. Margaret's trust, built over decades of sacrifice and unconditional love, was about to be tested in a way she never imagined. The day Margaret discovered the truth began like any other. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as she sipped her morning tea. But the knock at the door carried an unfamiliar weight. It was a representative from the electric company, informing her that service would be disconnected due to months of unpaid bills. Margaret's hands trembled. She knew she had enough savings to cover everything. She had always been careful. Confused and embarrassed, she called a trusted friend from Big Bethel AME Church, who drove her to the bank. Sitting across from the bank manager, Margaret listened as he explained that her account balance was nearly zero. Transfer after transfer had emptied it over several months. The total missing amount, $85,000, represented her entire life's savings. Her heart pounded as she stared at the transaction history. Every transfer led to Daniel's account. When she returned home, she waited quietly in the living room. Daniel walked in casually, unaware that everything had changed. Margaret held up the bank statement with shaking hands. "Tell me this isn't what it looks like," she said. Daniel avoided her eyes at first, then shrugged. "I was going to put it back," he muttered. "I just needed it for some investments and trips." "Trips?" she whispered. He didn't apologize. He didn't show remorse. He spoke about opportunities and future plans, as if her decades of sacrifice were a small inconvenience. Margaret felt something inside her crack. Not anger, but a deep, aching sorrow. She remembered the nights she worked double shifts to buy him school shoes. She remembered pawning her jewelry once to pay for his summer camp, and now he had taken everything without asking. That night, she sat alone in her bedroom, staring at a framed photo of Daniel as a child. Tears streamed down her face, but she kept her sobs quiet. Her grief was not only about money, it was about trust. It was about love given freely and returned with betrayal. The next morning, eviction warnings were taped to her front door. Without her savings, she had no way to keep up with property taxes and bills. Daniel had already packed his things. Before leaving, he said, "You're overreacting." It's not that serious, but it was serious. It threatened her home, her security, her dignity. Margaret realized that protecting him would now mean sacrificing herself entirely. And for the first time in her life, she faced a painful truth. Love does not mean allowing someone to destroy you. Members of Big Bethel AME Church quickly noticed Margaret's absence from Sunday service. When they visited her home and learned what had happened, they were stunned. Anger rippled through the congregation. But Margaret remained quiet, almost protective. "That's my grandson," she kept saying. "I don't want him locked away." Yet the reality grew harsher each day. Without financial support, she faced losing the house she had lived in for 4 decades. A local community advocate explained that what happened to her was considered elder financial exploitation, a serious crime under Georgia law. Margaret struggled with the decision. Reporting Daniel felt like betraying her own blood. But another voice inside her whispered that silence would only allow the behavior to continue. After many sleepless nights, she walked into a local police station with trembling hands and filed a report. Investigators traced the digital transactions, social media posts, and purchase records. The evidence was overwhelming. Daniel was arrested and charged. The case moved to the Fulton County Superior Court. The courtroom felt cold the day Margaret testified. She wore her lavender suit and held her Bible tightly. When asked why she decided to come forward, she answered softly, "Because no grandmother should lose her home for loving too much." Her testimony was steady but emotional. She described the years of sacrifice, the trust she placed in Daniel, and the fear of nearly becoming homeless. Jurors listened closely. Even Daniel avoided meeting her gaze. Margaret did not speak with bitterness. She spoke with dignity. She made it clear that justice was not about revenge. It was about accountability. Her courage inspired others in the courtroom. Reporters began to take notice, recognizing that her story represented a larger issue affecting seniors across the country. For Margaret, standing in that courtroom was one of the hardest moments of her life. But it was also the moment she reclaimed her voice. When the verdict was read, guilty, Margaret felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. Daniel was sentenced to prison time and ordered to repay the stolen funds. The judge emphasized that exploiting elderly family members would not be tolerated.